everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined, as always, by Derek Brissett. Derek, we have now had the second round of WXV taking place in Langley Event Centre for WXV 1. You know, I've I love as much rugby as possible, but I think we were kind of spoilt in round one of having a triple header, and now we're having the three games divided over 2 days.
Yeah.
Um, one game considerably had more hype than the other two, which was New Zealand versus England prior to the tournament. But we also had France versus the USA. And we have the game that we're going to mainly focus about, Canada versus Ireland. Before we get into the Canadian match, what do you think of the other two games?
Yeah, I mean, I think results wise, I feel like they're kind of predictable. It kind of seems like,
Hmm.
I mean, the way the tournament's ultimately shaken out, you're gonna have the two best teams playing like in Canada and England next week, playing to be the WXV champion, right? Which is kind of all how it works. Um, New Zealand, I mean, like, coming off that loss to Ireland, was kind of hoping maybe they would, you know, I guess kind of follow their All Blacks friends like line of thinking, and after a loss come out and absolutely destroy a team. But they did end up going up against the best team in the world, so unfortunately that just didn't happen. Um the only thing I saw, I think, like, it's the ultimately, I think with this tournament though, it does kind of, it feels like it's going to be over like a little too quickly. Like, I think I would have liked to see Canada get a crack at New Zealand and USA as well, but this just seems like the format of having six teams here, but you only play three games seems a little off. I feel like it could be a little bit more interesting. I would like to see New Zealand have a chance to like bounce back from an 0-2 start, which obviously they're not going to really be able to do because there's only like one game left or whatever, right? So, uh,
Yeah, I think that's something that was actually brought up is that because it's the Women's World Cup next year, the WXV won't be taking place. But there's going to be discussions of how the tournament grows and advance. There's already the discussion in 2027 of having a women's Lions tour, and there would be no WXV as a result
mhm.
of that. So one of the ideas that's been put forward is because, as you mentioned, playing New Zealand and the USA again, but we've already had those fixtures in the Pacific Four series. So the question then comes up is, could those results carry over into WXV? And then you're basically taking it as like, okay, it's a 5 game tournament and you've already played the first two. Now, again, this is just a suggestion. And the tournament is in its infancy. It does have the option to be flexible and decide these kind of things later. I think as well, if you're going to do that, you also need to have preliminary tournaments for every nation that's taking part. I know with WXV1, we have the Six Nations for the European teams and
You don't need to
the
do that.
Pacific Four series for the other
Is there a,
three teams.
you don't need to do that. Is there a preliminary Six Nations tournament? Just pick six teams and put them in a tournament.
I mean, for WXV 2 and 3, teams that don't have a competition format in place. But then again, maybe that is the case. Maybe it gets to a point where women's rugby is generating so much in ticket sales and stuff that you can justify having a 5 game tournament go on. Although that has to probably be collaborated with enterprises such as Premiership Women's Rugby, the French competition, Super Rugby in Australia and New Zealand for their respective teams. It's again, these are all things that have just been put forward. Obviously, the more rugby, the better. I think that's the general consensus. Um,
I
but
just
yeah,
like for
yeah,
the
sorry.
WXV, I think like ultimately, I feel like the tournament, as small as because this tournament is small, like a 16 tournament is pretty small.
Hmm.
All things considered, really. Like, I think it feels like it would feel like a more complete tournament if everyone had to play everyone. in a way,
Yeah.
like because even like like even like a team like England, like England and Canada, I guess are going to play next week. Whoever wins that game, just because it is stat table points, is gonna determine the winner. But it's like, it's kind of interesting to be like, does because I think then you start having conversations like, is one team's schedule like easier than another team's schedule with like,
Mhm.
England, like they both get to play Ireland, but then Canada had to play France, England has to play New Zealand. Like, can you like weigh like France versus New Zealand and be like one team technically had an easier schedule than another? Whereas if you play everybody, it's like it's all even, right? Or
Mm.
even like the other going the other way too. Like, it could be like the USA has a hard schedule because they have to play like whoever they had to play, like France, New Zealand, right? Like
Yeah.
that is the schedule unbalanced negatively and too hard for like USA or something.
Yeah.
And it's
But
I
I
think
think one of the ideas as well, because for WXV1 there is no promotion and relegation. It's just qualifying based on Six Nations and Pacific Four Series placement.
yeah,
But for XV2 and 3, there is promotion and relegation. So I
yeah,
believe the plan initially was to have promotion and relegation in from the 2026 tournament. But again, if we're going to be throwing in like Lions tours and World Cups are going to be so it's going to become like every 2 years. At that point, is there even a need for promotion or relegation? Do you just do it and then go again 2 years later and it's just a qualifying format for everyone? Again, these are discussions to be held in the future. Let's discuss something now, which actually did take place this weekend, which was the Canada Ireland game. Um, Now, going into this had been, I believe, the fourth time that Canada and Ireland have ever met in women's rugby. Canada held the record going in 2-1. Um, so, it's very, and I think it was something like 8 years since they last played each other. So, it's very difficult to determine. I think WXV even put out that it was basically like a 50-50 call, especially after Ireland's victory over the Black Ferns last week. So, difficult to say which way it was going. And, you know, as we saw in the game, it took about a good 25 minutes for any points to get on the board. Something else I want to mention as well, Canada's kits with the NFP logo on it. Even though green does not go with red at all, I think that just looked great. And obviously, this is being done as part of World Rugby's attention to color blindness to make it easier for people who are colorblind. So red and green won't be shown on the field at the same time. So Canada opted to have their white kits instead. And yeah, I think, first of all, I think Canada's white kit as well is just superb.
so
But
what do you mean? Is the rule like you can't have red jerseys anymore?
oh no, you can have but if a one team is their predominant color is red and the other
Yeah,
team's
that makes
predominant color is green, you can't. One of those has to change.
what I'm just trying to understand, why does that mean that the sponsor logo on Canada's jerseys had to be green?
I No, it didn't. I just think it looked good as green
Okay.
on a white
I thought you
background.
were saying that's because of the color blindness rule.
No, sorry, that was just like a personal choice of but it's because of this colorblind policy. Canada weren't in their red kit. That's what I mean.
Oh,
Um,
because they were playing Ireland. I get you.
yeah.
Oh,
So it's going to be real interesting in the Six Nations next year when Ireland come to Cardiff and Wales have to change their kit to a different color as a result. Um,
Wales would be the home team. Ireland should have to change their jersey.
Well, it's the
Think Cardiff.
tradition is that the home team change their kit. Also, maybe Macron are wanting to shell out.
That's
Yeah.
backwards. The away team should have to change
Do you,
their.
do you actually know the history of this?
No, I do not. No, I do not actually.
So back in ye old days when rugby was amateur and teams would go on tours to say from the home nations like New Zealand, or likewise New Zealand would come to Europe and play Wales, Cardiff, Pontypool, and England and stuff like that. they were obviously taking a boat or they were flying, but they could only take so much kit.
Oh,
And therefore, it was seen as the home team's duty to wear an alternative if there was a kit clash, because obviously they could source an alternative kit much easier than the visitors.
all right. Okay, that makes sense. It's not 1906 anymore. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, no. Now it's just cash grabs
yeah,
for
exactly.
like
People
the kit
say,
supplier to do
yeah,
it. But
that
that's the
is cool
tradition
though.
of
That is cool.
that's
I
why they
think
changed.
that's kind of interesting though too, because it's like in hockey, the tradition of essentially one team wearing a white jersey came about because you couldn't tell the difference between the two teams on a black and white TV. So they were like they
Okay.
had to make one team wear white. It's also black and white TVs are also why the ice is painted white because as you know,
Mm,
ice is clear, so it would take the color of whatever's beneath it, which is usually concrete. And on a black and white TV, you couldn't see the puck on top of
mm,
black concrete either. So that's why hockey still does although hockey has flip-flopped whether it's the home team or the away team wearing the white
yeah.
over time. But generally, yeah, that goes back to that too. I think also this it was kind of the same, a similar thing. Like, I mean, I think when they originally did it, the home team had to wear white, and then
Mm,
the visiting team would do the same thing. They would just bring the.
yeah. Yeah. I
I
think
feel like that actually does kind of
yeah. Yeah. Back in the origins of these sports,
that
it was
does
like
make
the
sense.
home team would have the accessibility. It was just a logistical
I
issue.
believe I believe the OHL actually still does that because it's they have a crazy travel schedule and they have to take buses to all the
Mm,
stuff. So I think if you get a team on like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday road trip in three different cities, you rock the one color jersey and everybody else
yeah.
the home team
Yeah.
for the white. Yeah. So I think it does make sense. But I
Yeah.
think the national teams for Ireland and Wales can figure out how to have Ireland
Yeah.
show up with a white jersey in Cardiff though.
Yeah. True, but in this example with Canada Island, Canada
And as
opted
the
to
home
wear
team,
their
so
white jersey because they're the home team.
that,
Um,
and it should have a green
as
jersey just to mess with Ireland. Be like, we're wearing green. Good luck, guys.
yeah, yeah, you change. Um, so, but yeah, as in we're going into this game, and nothing's really coming about. The defense is really good. I've got to point out like Stacey Flood channeling her inner Lucas Rumble and just getting those um like mole steals and just getting her hands over the ball. She did that against New Zealand. She's doing it again against Canada. But we get to about like the 25th minute, and we finally start to see some cracks in the Irish defense. So first of all, we have Jugan getting a yellow card for a deliberate knock on, and then that sets up a penalty, which then becomes a line out. And then as it's going over, O'Dowd illegally takes the ball down. It's a penalty try, and as a result, she gets a yellow card. So in the space of 2 minutes, Ireland have gone from being 15 up to being down two players and conceding 7 points.
Mhm.
That said, there then becomes like a continued defensive effort from Ireland. And 5 minutes later, it's Canada that's getting a yellow card from Ellis, who, didn't really do much too wrong, but it was more an accumulation of errors, and the referee had had enough, and she said essentially, do it again, and you're off to next player's off to the bin. That's what happened.
And then
So it's easy to argue that Canada didn't really get much of a advantage from being up two players
mhm.
until we get to the 34th minute, and lots of again another line out. No, sorry, a scrum that goes to passing it down the pitch, a little bit of handling, and the ball just going to ground, but Canada contain possession, and then Gallagher goes over in the corner. And so by this point, it's now been that the Joe Gang is back on the field. So Ireland are up to 14 again. And then we have probably the play of the game in which we see
Disagree, but okay.
um, basically Ireland have the ball. It gets turned over. Omakale gets finds a gap, runs forward, gets a try, and Canada are up 21-3 going into the half. And then we get the second half, and this was a very frustrating half to watch. I say, from a neutral perspective, it was incredibly low scoring. And from a Canadian perspective, it was scoring for Ireland and nothing for Canada. And now you can argue that both teams like put in their defense, and obviously you have the argument, great offense is a good defense. We have you're saying, Derek, of the best offense is a massive lead, which
Correct.
Canada still had.
17.
Um,
It's good defense.
yeah. But basically that was the final scoring option. All points have been scored before 50 minutes, and then we just had uh second half filled with frustration, I think is the best way to describe it. And um, eventually ends with Ireland having the ball, getting pushed into touch, the referee blowing a whistle. Final score 21-8. So I said the play of the half was the build up to the Omar Kale try. Derek, what do you think is the play of the match?
I was actually going to say, I think for the second match in a row, the best play in the game and the best try in the game actually goes against Canada. That Constantine try for Ireland, coming off of the the huge line break, um, sorry, the huge line break from Wafer, off of the scrum, and like she picked up like what 30-40 meters, which resulted in a penalty for Canada with advantage. They went for the big crossfield kick that was finished off in the corner very nicely. I feel like that was a much better play. I think the second game in a row, because last week against France, that 50-22 into the quick lineup,
Hmm.
that was nasty. So Canada, although they are winning, I feel like giving up some highlight reel tries in this tournament.
Yeah,
But
that's
on the positive note, giving up less tries than they're scoring, so we're 2-0.
yeah, that's I fully agree with that. A win is a win is a win is a
Yeah,
win.
exactly. I'll take
I
You can score as many nice tries. Other teams can score as many nice tries as they want,
As long as there's fewer
as long
tries
as they have
overall
less
than
tries.
Canada's
Yeah.
tries. Yeah.
I
Yes.
I
Hear
thoroughly
that, England? Hear that, England? You can score as many tries as you want, so long as it's fewer than Canada's tries. No, so yeah, like the first of all, taking 25 minutes for either team to score is frustrating, especially after last week's fixture against France and Ireland's fixture against New Zealand, where we had scores coming pretty early on within the first 10 minutes. Um, so, solid defensive efforts, but watching this game back, there were so many opportunities that went begging, um, passes being thrown incorrectly, getting the ball knocked on, having the ball turned over. And yeah, again, we've talked about like defense for Canada was obviously very solid in the second half, but they did have multiple attacking phases where it just went to nothing. And you can
they had
obviously
that
make the
big line out opportunity at the end of the first half too that
yeah,
stole.
yeah, that yeah. So I think obviously having scoring three tries in the first half definitely covered up some of the mistakes that had been prevalent, I'd say, throughout the game. And you can point to Ireland and say, they disrupted their playing style. I mean, they clearly did that against the Black Ferns as well, so they're definitely a team on the ascendancy. And now we have Canada playing them. And again, a win is a win, but we don't want to get into the position where bonus points are going to be like the deciding factor, especially in a tournament where you only play three games. And you
Yeah.
know, there were so many chances where Canada could have scored anywhere from 1 to 4 more tries in this match, and it's just because a pass was either short or low, or the ball got knocked on and stuff like that. And that's the frustrating thing to see because yeah, maybe Ireland will turn it around into, or like Ireland will knock it on and then it's a scrum to Ireland, or Ireland kick it away and then we have to just go through the phases again. England won't do that. England will, you give England an inch and they'll run the 100 meters and score under the posts.
Yeah, unless they forget Ellie Kildun at the hotel.
Yeah, Ellie, take a break.
Yeah, yeah,
It's okay.
yeah.
You know what? Say you only want to do like the final 90 seconds of it,
Oh,
and
that's far too much time. Don't give her that much time.
you do laps around the stadium first. Then she'll come in, and then yeah, probably score 2 tries in the meantime. But let's talk about let's talk about the positives from this game. I think Claire Gallagher is definitely coming to a role as fly half, number 10.
Yeah, player of the match
Um,
as well.
yeah, I think Fancy Bermudez had a pretty good game. Obviously, not many highlight reel moments as there were against France.
Well, it's like,
But
what's your definition of highlight reel, though, right? Like, if you're thinking like highlight reel is only tries, then yeah, I guess she didn't have a highlight reel play, but she also was like, I think covered well in the defense, from the wing, but also had, I think, I think it was late in the first half, maybe. I think it was late in the first half. She had a huge breakdown steal too, as Ireland were kind of pressing to score late in that half too, right? So depends.
I'm just going off of I've seen the highlight reel and there's much less
As we've
Fancy Bermudez than there was in
discussed,
the highlights against France.
yeah, as we've discussed previously on this podcast, World Rugby is bad at making highlight reels. They don't show
Yeah.
important things or good plays. They just show
To be honest,
great.
they
Yeah,
with WXV they have been getting better.
they
I
are
think that
better.
is
I hate
definitely a
I,
huge improvement from last year.
yeah. I hate the like the highlight reels and stuff, because I know like a lot of leagues do this where they show like the opening kickoff, and it's like I don't need to see that. It's like I understand that the game started. It's fine. Just like skip to the first important thing that's happened. I don't need to and then they'll show like replays of stuff. It's like just show me what happened. It's it's bad. Why?
Yeah.
Side. This is a
Yeah.
tangent
um
to go into this.
yeah, so one of the bits of information that came out just before the game, I believe, was O'Macale was meant to start on the bench, but due to illness, she moved up into the starting 15, which meant we got to have Karen Packwee on the bench, who then got onto the field at the 65th minute. And I was watching, I was going like, let's get Karen onto the pitch and let's see if she can turn these youngsters around and get them going. And sure enough, within 90 seconds of her being on the pitch, Canada had a penalty and we're back in Ireland's half. So, you know, obviously we've had Karen on the show before. It was great talking to her, and she's been doing her rugby in Quebec and her coaching as well. So seeing her back on the field in a Canadian jersey was fantastic to see again. Um, Obviously, because of the yellow card, I feel like Caroline Crosley um, was a bit like left out. She had to come off, I believe, in like the 33rd minute to because they needed front row cover for Ellis. And then once Rory Wood, who was the front row replacement, came off, they immediately had Forteza come in instead. So
Yeah.
I feel a bit hard done by it. It's like, but that's the thing with any time a front row gets sent off, someone else has to pay the price for it, and it's a bit of a shame. Yeah, and I think I think this was, if I remember correctly, Taylor Perry's first start as well
Yeah.
in a couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, competing at the Olympics has definitely improved, raised her profile in Canadian Rugby. She was on for the first half and was subbed off for Shell in I think like the 50th minute or so. And then we have, like the standard players who are always doing well. Corrigan, Tessier, Apps when she came on. Booka Boom did fantastic for her first, only on for the first half as well before Royer came on to replace her. Holtkamp went the distance, and as did Senf and Peltier and Peltier, sorry, and Gallagher. Um, yeah, so it's I think the thing that's frustrating for me is these errors happened with a team this talented. And again, you have when you have a big enough lead, you can absolutely afford to try something new and it not pull off. But I would rather they do that on the training pitch and then actually score tries in the games. But
I mean, I think
that
like I
that
think
that's me being selfish.
yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly moments of this game where you can definitely look to and be like, ah, that's a try scoring opportunity that didn't come off because of, an error from Canada when that's just ball handling or like, like we said, like that at the end of the first half there to extend the lead, right? Could have really buried Ireland at that point too. Right, and Ireland stole the line out when they were 5 meters out to end the half, right? So it's like there's definitely opportunities in this game that could have gone by. But I think like I feel like it was kind of like I feel like it was just a really bit of a tight like defensive contest. Like neither team really had a lot going in like attack. Even like Ireland, like after they scored their try in the second half, like the last 30 minutes of the game or whatever, they didn't really have a big sniff to like an attempt to score and attempt to like, close the gap on that lead. They were never really close, right? So it's like Canada, I think, did play very well defensively. Um, Especially in the second half. Like they just didn't do anything. I think Ireland was also playing well defensively. And like really with this game, I think ultimately came down to, I think was just an 11-minute window where Ireland had two yellow cards and Canada scored all their tries. And
Yeah, pretty much.
like that's what the and I know Ellis got her yellow card in the middle of that, but like I mean, like that's really what this game came down to. It's like it's kind of tight. Like it's ultimately, I think it's like the game you're saying like Canada didn't necessarily capitalize on every opportunity that they had, which is probably a fair criticism. But like in really looking at it, it's like Canada was given a big opportunity with two Irish players taking yellow cards within like what 30 seconds of each other,
Hmm.
right? And during that 11-minute stretch, even though Ellis took a yellow card in the middle of that, during that 11-minute stretch, Canada completely took advantage of that and scored three tries. Right, Tessier converted all the kicks, right, for the 21 points in that 10-minute window, and ultimately, like that's a huge opportunity. You don't normally get to play a team with only 13 players, right? So it's like you have to be able to make that work. If anything, you're probably a little frustrated that Ireland managed to get 3 points out of that, right? If anything, but ultimately, like the three tries that you scored during that 10-minute window, which was your biggest opportunity of the game, right, is ultimately what won the game. So they took advantage of that. And then the rest of the game was, I believe your terminology would be for the purists. It was just a very tight game where not neither team really had a whole lot going on um offensively, but I think that I think that's just kind of a little part of that is just I think to a credit to both teams defense. They were making their tackles. The breakdowns were very competitive. um and both team set pieces were good. It was a fun battle to watch. And yeah, Canada could probably look at this and be like, there's a couple opportunities that they missed, but on the flip side of that, didn't really give Ireland any opportunities to come back in the game. And the biggest opportunity that they had was an 11-minute window that they took full advantage of and ultimately decided the game. the game wasn't over after that 11-minute window by any stretch, but considering how well the defense held up against and didn't really give Ireland much of a chance outside of that one blip in the second half that led to a try, but like the Ireland never really got close either. So
Mm.
like ultimately I think like you said, going into England, you if you have a chance to score a try, you kind of need to take it. Um,
Yeah.
England's not going to let you get away with that. Um, but defensively, like if you can hold England to, you can prevent England from not scoring tries. That's also very beneficial. So I think ultimately you get like like kind of with anything, it's like you get positives. You're happy with the win, and
Hmm.
you got a few things that can be worked on. But ultimately, I think this team's got to be feeling pretty good going up against the world number ones next week.
Yeah, it's going to be an absolute. It's basically like a clash of the titans. It's first and second in the world.
Yeah.
That doesn't involve New Zealand, which is strange.
Cool. Hey, the
Strange
men's
when
side
you
doesn't involve
like that.
New Zealand in the first, second in the world either. Times are changing,
Yeah.
man.
Times they are a changing. Now, if you've been watching the WXV, and of course you have, we're a Canadian rugby podcast talking about it. You may have noticed that there's been a few changes to the rules and the laws of the game itself. So the conversion attempt is taking 60 seconds instead of 90. The scrum half is considered protected from the like attacking team. The opposing scrum half is kept back to the middle of the scrum, and that's because World Rugby have been trialing some new laws. Now, it's not just at the WXV; these new laws have come in for the PNC and the Rugby Championship as well.
Mhm.
And now these law changes are going to the next stage, which is they're going will go out to union region consultation ahead of the World Rugby Council on the 14th of November, where it'll be voted on if these new laws come into play. So these laws include a few things such as reducing the conversion time, as I said, instead of 90 seconds, it's 60 seconds. This aligns them with penalty kicks. Scrum and lineouts have 30 seconds to be set. Um, when it comes to a restart, if the ball goes beyond the 22-meter line, the defending team can call the mark. Mulls can only be stopped once before they have to use it. There's no more calling of once. It's just use it. And play on in uncontested lineouts. So if a ball is not thrown straight and the other team do not contest the lineout, then play can continue as normal. And there's also the protection of the scrum half, which means that the offside of a scrum is the midpoint of the scrum, the feed point usually. And from there, these results have come in. And from the Pacific Nations Cup, Rugby Championship, and WXV, they found an increased time of ball in play, the shorter total match time because there are fewer stoppages, higher restart contestability, there's more dynamic mauls taking place, there's fewer line-out infringements, and the set pieces and quicks sorry, the set pieces and kicks are much quicker as a result. Another thing that they are saying is being included is there'll be updates to the TMO protocol, and the red card lasts for 20 minutes before the player gets replaced in a match. Derek,
Mhm.
this is seeming awfully familiar to MLR, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I guess some rules definitely are. Obviously, like the kick clock, right, is, and I think ultimately, I'm like, honestly, I think that's probably the rule that makes the most sense of all of these.
Yeah.
It's the shortened kick clocks. I mean, like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like you need that much time to do it. Although it has led to some funny situations in MLR occasionally where you catch an equipment guy on the sidelines sleeping or something, and they don't bring the T out, which is kind of funny sometimes. I think that's happened like once or twice in like once or twice in during the MLR, which is kind of funny. Um, Yeah, and it's like I think like there's obviously other things here too. Like it's not the same rule, but I feel like the 30-second scrum and line out limit, which personally I don't like that one at all. But that feels like it's kind of in line with the only one scrum restart that the MLR has been using, right?
Mm,
Like something to like make sure, I guess, to limit how long scrums take, which we maybe we can get into this a little bit later, but I don't understand why you want to do that at all. Um, but yeah, like I think there are that like there's obviously a little bit of an MLR influence. Obviously, you don't see some of the more quirky MLR rules like 7 point tries aren't being trialed
mm,
yet, but um I mean, the 20-minute red card is also that's also a big MLR one. Personally, I really like that rule. I think it's worked. I think it has worked really well in Major League Rugby. And you know, the player that commits that infraction still gets punished. He's out of the game. But
mm,
like, you know, if you do that 3 minutes into the game, like, yeah, like your team has to survive 20 minutes playing, you know, down a player, but like you know, the if you can get through that, it can make the last 60 of the game really interesting. I think, you know, we've all seen, I feel like we've kind of all seen games where at some point where it's like there's a super early red card and then the game feels like it's over 15 minutes later, uh,
yeah.
which is never too fun to watch. But like, yeah, but so I think kind of those ones seem to be the most MLR influence. I think the 60-second kick clock, love it. That's perfect. It's worked well in
Mm,
MLR as well. I think the red card, 20-minute red card has worked really well. The shortening, the 30-second scrum thing, I don't like that. I also don't like the one scrum reset in MLR. It kind of feels like it's sort of in the same family, even though it's a separate rule. The one rule though that I'm like I just kind of feel like I want some clarification on. Like I don't the if the play will continue if the ball is not thrown straight during an uncontested lineout. So, like in theory, Stu, if I'm playing against your team, right?
yeah.
And I'm like assessing the game and I'm kind of thinking, "Hey, I don't think your team is going to contest this lineout. Could I just launch that ball to my backs?" On the gamble that you don't contest it. And then you just be like, it's not a contested line out. I threw it 15 meters back that way to the fly half because I
Mm.
was like, I took the risk that you wouldn't contest the line out. And now my fly half has the ball, and you're like, your defense is like, well, what do we do now?
Well, I think because of how the laws regarding lineouts are done, first of all, if you can throw the ball 15 meters, I think, you know, well done. But
Yeah,
also,
you don't think there's a hooker that could hit a fly half from like 15, 20 meters out?
uh,
Or even
no,
like the scrum half, like someone move
yeah.
the fly half closer. It doesn't matter.
So,
Be that
so
far.
this is actually one of the things that like came up
How does
in
that like how does
the
that law work is what I'm
yeah.
asking.
Anyway, so this is something that came up is that I think the thing when it comes to that is, let's say, take for example, France doing the 50-22 and then passing the ball back into play and then scoring a try.
Yeah.
Well, you can say, well, she's on the line, she's doing a line out, and the ball's not going straight, it's going towards her side, it's going towards
Yeah.
her player. That's and the line out may not have been contested, but that's the problem, is in like it's like she didn't
But
throw
that's
it
not a
straight, so now we have to have a scrum instead. And so if you want to be real pedantic about it, you could do that. But I think it is one of these cases that World Rugby are doing where they want the game to move quicker.
which I don't understand.
And it's a case of, if one of the teams isn't going to contest the line out and the ball is thrown not straight, is like, well, if the other team isn't contesting, does it really make a difference? And I think that's what this like trial has been trying to do. It's been trying to say that, obviously, maybe throwing it 15 meters to a scrum half and fly off is something that can be exploited if it ever does come to the council approval. But for the time being, it is the idea of we just need to get this game moving along. You've had 30 seconds to set up this line out. If we know that these guys, if this team isn't going to be contesting this line out, let's just get the ball moving.
Yeah.
Let's just actually get playing rugby instead of no, um we've got to give a scrum to the other team because the other team didn't want to engage in this part of rugby in the first. It's like just get it moved. If you want
Yeah.
people to get involved in the game, play the game. And if this is something that just gets more rugby played, fine.
I see. The thing is, though, is like I don't understand how this, like, first of all, if it's every good coach's job to exploit the rules, like you
Yeah.
have to figure that out. So I'm willing to bet, unless, like, I mean, I'm just looking at World Rugby's website. All it says is the play will continue if the ball's not thrown straight. Right.
Yeah.
I feel like if that's the actual wording in the law, it's like someone's going to try it at some point to go,
Yeah.
like, we're going to gamble this that you're not going to contest it. And I'm throwing it like out to my backs because we got a hooker that has an app. Patrick Mahomes is our hooker. So it's going to, um, but
Yeah.
I think, like, beyond that though, like, I think it's interesting that the other thing that you kind of referenced there, obviously the accessibility and stuff, but and, like, wanting the key things that World Rugby has highlighted on their press release is that the new laws are designed to, like, in a line with their mission to make the game more accessible and engaging, right? And also all of the positive feedback that they kind of highlight is basically surrounding more ball and play time, shorter matches, all that stuff,
Mm.
right? And I'm just like, I think it's not that I have an issue with these law changes. I just don't understand how any of these law changes act like help you reach the goals that they're talking about here, right? Like the more accessibility and stuff, and even like more ball and play, things like that. Like, I don't understand how, if they're talking about making the game more accessible and engaging, I don't understand how any of these laws do that and accomplish that. And part of, like, what I think is that we're talking about the 30-second scrum and lineout limit. You just
Yeah.
identified something that's already in the rules. You can take a quick lineout. You can forego the lineout. You don't even have to set up a lineout. You can just go if you want to, right? Like, and honestly, that takes way less than 30 seconds to do that, as we saw with France versus Canada last week. It takes way
Yeah.
less than 30 seconds to do that, and that's already in the laws. Like, you don't have to do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's like, I don't
So
get that. And okay,
So,
yeah.
like this is my thing when it comes to like 30-second scrum and line out limit. We've seen, close games where, just, a 4 point difference or a try
Mhm.
will be the thing. And the opposing team gets a line out in the opposition's 22. They've got like 90 seconds on the clock. They need to get this going.
Yeah.
And then the defending team that's already up, they know all they need to do is run down the clock. So
Right.
they will huddle around. They'll say, give an opinion on the weather and stuff like that. And they'll slowly saunter over to the mark for the line out. And the other team is getting frustrated because they know that if they can get the ball, if they can steal it, then they can push for the try. And the other team is like, we'll take as long as we can. What's the rush, guys? Gotta relax. You gotta get going. I mean, we're already up by 4. What's all the big thing? And then if they get the ball, and all it needs is like a few seconds for the clock to go red, and then they kick it into touch. Boom, they've
Okay.
won the game.
All right.
And so, in the same way that you're saying a coach finds all these ways to exploit the rules,
Oh, yeah.
something is telling me that this rule has been exploited for so long that that's something that they can do. Like the referee can say, like, "Come on, guys, we need to hurry up. We need to hurry up." And then it's if they do take too long, penalty to the opposition.
What?
but that is at the discretion of the referee. And
Listen,
now this is
penalty.
putting a line in the sand of saying this is the time limit. You have 30 seconds to set this up. And if you are not done within 30 seconds, then we are going to go in a different direction. You're going to be penalized and we're going to go this way. So this is not in the sense of
Hmm.
players are taking 2 minutes to get everything together. Have you actually like sat down and timed something for 2 minutes? It takes a fair bit of time. But it's the idea, I think, of like we have been saying like, oh, it's the referee's interpretation of the law. This referee does it to the letter. This referee interprets another way. This is saying this is the limit. This is the limit that all you guys and girls have to now abide by. You have 30 seconds to be in the line out. You have 30 seconds to be in the scrum. You know it, the players know it, the referees know it, and now the audience knows it, and that's the line in the sand. No more faffing around. This is the line.
I get it, but
You
like,
don't like it.
no, I don't like it at all. I think it's like, so I think it's honestly like I kind of go with it, and it's like because like I think everything that you described there, I think is like that's part of what makes rugby interesting is like tactics, right? And
Yeah.
as you said, that idea to kill the clock is a tactic, right? Setting up and trying to like take a long time to set up a scrum is a bit of a tactic, but so is also maybe intentionally collapsing it to get a restart, stuff like that. None of that is in these rules, by the way. It just says it's 30 seconds for a scrum setup. Doesn't mention restarts and stuff. But I think like ultimately when I think of rugby, right? To me, the reason and the real reason why I don't like this rule, I think, is because of this. I feel like in rugby, like the most iconic part of the sport is the scrums, right? Like
Yeah.
to people that don't watch rugby, that know nothing about rugby, if they do know one thing, maybe two things, it's probably that you can't pass forward and there's scrums. Right. And I think it's like one of the most iconic part of the sport. Even like we're Canadian, or well, you're Canadian now, actually. I can include you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're Canadian, right? Hockey is the most popular sport in Canada, and rugby scrum is a piece of hockey terminology, right? For like when there's essentially just a big pile of players, right? It doesn't actually resemble a rugby scrum, but that's kind of how iconic a rugby scrum is that the term rugby scrum has found its way into other parts of life. Um, and I think like weirdly, it seems like every time World Rugby comes up with these laws, and I'm gonna loop in Major League Rugby with the scrum reset thing, it seems like every time they do, it's like we're just getting closer and closer to getting rid of scrums. Like
Mm.
we're taking steps to I think these laws, it's like we're just taking steps to being rugby league. Like if a scrum takes too long to do, and it's you think a scrum is limiting accessibility, it's not as engaging, it takes too long, right? And if somebody is watching rugby and is like, man, I really like this, but these scrums are super annoying. I gotta tell you, man, I have a sport for you to go check out. And
I
World
just
Rugby League.
want to, so I just want to stop you there because I want to clarify something that is in
Oh,
this law change is that so it says scrums and lineouts must be set within 30 seconds. The scrum itself does not need to take 30 seconds total
yeah,
before there to be
it's
coming
that.
on. So it's like from the referee blowing the whistle for the scrum penalty to crouch,
Yeah.
that is 30 seconds.
No, that's fine. And like I still kind of and I still like I get that, right? Obviously that would be like, hey, if the scrum has to get reset, you got 30 seconds to stand back
Yeah.
thing and then reset. Like that part makes sense, but I'm just saying like I mean if the whole goal is to save time, you can just get rid of them. Like there is a sport that doesn't have scrums, that doesn't have lineouts, right? Like
Yeah,
get rid of them.
but I don't want to go and use like the slippery slope fallacy
Oh,
of
I
we're
don't think
just
I
turning
don't think
into
it's
I think you can strike a balance between saying
yeah.
we like scrums and we want to keep scrums,
Yeah.
but we want to get to the action part
This
sooner.
See, that's the thing. The scrum is the action part, though.
Yes, but
That's
that's the
a
thing.
big part.
What I'm saying is the crouch, bind, set,
Oh, okay.
and
So
then
with
the
this,
resulting action. That we
how?
keep that. It's the getting to that point
Oh, that's fine.
that
Okay.
needs to be
So
reduced.
how?
That's what the law change is.
Okay, yeah, it does. It'll make it a little bit faster. How does that make the game more accessible?
Because you're not watching guys or girls stand on a pitch
How does that make the game
debating
more
on when
accessible?
it gets on.
The most popular sport in North America is football. The NFL has a 40-second play clock. You're just watching guys set up for 40 seconds every 10 seconds.
Yeah,
It's
but do you know what? But American football
yeah,
has a foothold that rugby does not in North
exactly. So
America.
that's kind of the point. That's the point, though. It's people. I think this happens with rugby and a lot of other sports. Is it's like, especially rugby, like it or like any other sport, really. It's like there's so many times where I feel like sports try to make rule changes to be like, we need to make the game faster. We need to, increase scoring, whatever, right? And then it's but like, for what is the actual end goal? Because it's like you said, right? Football has a huge foothold in North America that rugby does not, right? The difference between rugby's popularity in North America and football's popularity in North America isn't because a scrum is 30 seconds, right? That's not going to change how popular rugby is anywhere, right? The difference is culture. Similarly to how I'm sure the NFL or the CFL isn't anywhere near as popular as rugby in New Zealand, right? The difference is culture, right? Like that's going to be where we come into. I don't think anybody like in North America is like looking at rugby and being like, you know what? This sport seems really cool. If only the matches were 3 minutes shorter, right? Like, which is a reason they highlight it as like a positive thing, right? And it's like we're changing like the time and stuff. And it's like there's a lot of sports that have a high rate of ball and play time, right? For example, hockey. Hockey's the best puck and play, I guess. Hockey's the best puck and play sport, right? It's full 60 minutes. The clock doesn't move unless the puck's in play, right? Like it's
Yeah.
ultimate ball and play sport, right? But it's like that doesn't necessarily make it more popular in other parts of the world that aren't like Canada, USA, Russia, Finland, and Sweden, right? Like it's not necessarily going to move the needle all that much. And it's like, and for the same reason, I'm kind of like, I look at these and I think like, I feel like all of these laws, when you're saying things like we need to make it more accessible, we need to make it more engaging, are like, and then being like, well, it's going to be more accessible if the ball's in play for 90 extra seconds or whatever, or if, the match time is 3 minutes shorter, right? Like, I don't think that is actually going to lead to helping the creation of new fans. I think if you want to put in laws and rules to make things more accessible, more engaging to new fans, especially, make a law that says, it's, mandatory names on the backs of jerseys so you can actually identify players.
Mm.
And that would be like, that's more accessible and more engaging to new fans because you can actually like identify the players on the field, right?
Mm.
Like it's something that Ireland had. And I think like, I mean, ultimately, I'm not going to lie. I don't know the most about the Irish women's national team, but the names on the backs of the jerseys help me pick up on it a little bit faster, right? Rugby has no, like one of the things you talked about the NFL and the culture and stuff. That's one of the things that like the NFL does really a great job at is obviously but it's individually like marketing their players as well. Like you see Travis Kelce everywhere, you see Josh Allen everywhere, you see like Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, right? Like you
Mm.
see all these guys like everywhere, right? Same with the NBA. NBA does a really good job of that too. Whereas it's like rugby, you have nothing to like identify with a lot of the players because I can go to the store and buy a Travis Kelce jersey. I can't go to the store and buy an Anton DuPont jersey, And that's not just because I'm in Canada and we don't have anywhere that actually sells rugby jerseys, but it's like you
Mm,
actually can't go and buy an Anton Dupont jersey,
yeah. I
which is
think
insane.
so. I think
You want to go to the game.
the overall reason why World Rugby is doing this maybe isn't accessibility, it's presentability.
But that's what they
Remember,
said, to make the game more accessible. That's what the
no,
reason.
no, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
What they're actually doing is making it more presentable, specifically to sponsors, because they are wanting to get a big financial investment from having two Rugby World Cups take place in the United States. Now, the thing that I've been saying when it comes to the 31 and 33 World Cups is do not look at it in the same way as Japan hosting in 2019. You have to look at it as the USA hosting the FIFA World Cup back in, I think it was like 84 or something.
Uh,
When
no, I was in the 90s. Like I think it's no, so they had the Olympics in Atlanta in 96, so I think the World Cup was like 97. Right.
94,
Oh,
that was it.
94. Dang. All right, I had
Yeah.
them backwards.
Okay. And so,
I know the Olympic one was right though. I don't
yeah,
know soccer, man.
so yeah, so
Soccer.
look at it not as um Japan 2019, look at it as USA 94 for FIFA World Cup.
Yeah.
Now, you can look at that time and say that soccer isn't a big thing in the United States. It's, this is a waste of a tournament. We should have it in a European nation, or we should have it over here instead, or, Italy should have it, or Argentina should have it. It's like, that's not the point, because what's happening in 2026 is the FIFA World Cup is returning to North America. It is going to be the biggest
I know
sporting
that'll be crazy.
event over a month. It is going to be astronomically huge. It is going to be incredibly profitable. It has taken 32 years for the United States and specifically North America to get to this point.
Yeah.
That is why the World Cup is going to the United States in 2031. It's so that in 32 years' time, in 2063, when the World Rugby goes back to the United States, the idea is that it is going to be so profitable and the biggest rugby tournament that has ever happened. That is the idea. This is the foothold. But to get to that point, you need to make it marketable. You need to make it profitable. Yes, we know you just mentioned Antoine Dupont, possibly the biggest rugby star of this generation. And
Yeah.
that's great. But the US wants to have their own names. They want to have like Shanana, Jamison Shanana Full, Fernanda Schultz. I keep getting his name mixed up. On the back, you want to have all the US guys
Yeah.
on jerseys. You want to have those be as accessible as
Yeah, of
getting a
course.
Patrick Mahomes jersey across anywhere in North America.
Of course.
And that's the thing. So it's the same thing that's going on with MLR. It's the same thing. And now that World Rugby has invested in MLR with Anthem, this is the big thing. They want to get as much financial support now as they can.
But how do these rules?
And to do that, you need to advertise the action of the sport, not the tactics, not the um planning and stuff like that. That's what they're going to do. That's why they've been tweaking all these rules to be like, okay, we want to reduce the overall game time as possible because we want to have fewer stoppages, because then we're not showing stoppages in play, we're showing the play itself. And that's the stuff that we do for like highlight reels and stuff. And if you say to like a fan and stuff like, oh yeah, the game's 80 minutes, plus there's halftime, plus there's like a few stoppages in play if no one gets injured, it'd probably be like 2 hours tops. And because for a lot of people, time is valuable, so they want to be like they want to know when do they arrive, how long is it going to be, and when do they leave. I mean, we've like
That's
the
not
Super Bowl.
necessary.
The Super Bowl is an American football game that takes on paper 60 minutes and in actuality is 4 hours.
But that's what I
So
mean, though, right?
so
Like, a lot of
so
the North American sports are like that, right? Like
yeah,
rugby is longer than everything. Like let's go traditional North American, so maybe I'll take out soccer out of that. But
yeah.
like rugby's 80 minutes, and I just like if you go to tsn.ca right now and you want to
Yeah.
watch the replay of the Canada Ireland game, the total runtime from pregame, half pregame, first half, halftime, second half, post game, the whole runtime of that entire video is 2 hours and 1 minute. Like the games already aren't long. Whereas if you compare them to like North America, it's like a hockey game, even though, like I said, it's the ultimate puck and play, ball and play sport, right?
Yeah.
Is like that 60-minute game takes 2.5 to 3 hours to play. A football, an NFL game or a CFL game will take 3 to 4 hours to play. A baseball game can take anywhere between 80 minutes and 7 hours, depending on what's happening
Yeah.
in the game, right?
Yeah.
Like and basketball is still over 2 hours, despite the fact that it's only a 48-minute game, barely, just barely over half the length of a rugby game, and it
Yeah.
probably takes the same amount of time to play,
Yeah.
right? And it's
But
like that's why I'm just like I don't think the amount of time it takes to play
yeah.
the game is the factor in people watching it or not. That's
I
what
th
I'm trying to say.
so
I don't think it's
so
a factor.
so my counter to that, because I do agree with everything you're saying, Derek. My
Of course,
counter to that
really,
is coming from like the commercial accumulation side of it. Is that
sure.
so say that
But
you're a
okay,
so
so then
no
how?
no no let me just explain, and that's what I mean. So let's say that you're a fan of an NHL team, an NFL team.
Sure.
You're kind of into baseball, you're kind of into basketball, but like those are your two big sports that you follow.
Yeah.
And you know families that, it's like once you're born, you're a fan of this team
Right.
kind of thing. So just by saying I've just given four sports of four of the five biggest leagues in the world, not just North America, in the world.
Yeah.
They have a cultural foothold, and we have talked for ages, multiple times, of how rugby is a minority sport in North America. And so, coming from a commercial point of view, is you don't have the cultural heritage that you do with a lot of these other sports. You don't have the global appeal that you maybe like compared to soccer, for example. Like if you go to any country and you have a soccer ball, they know what that is. You go with a rugby ball, maybe not so much. So you have to come at them with something that's saying like, "Hey, this is a new sport that is worthy of your time. This is how much we can give you in the available time you have." Because we have been to Arrows games whilst the Leafs are in the playoffs, and the attendance has been minuscule, hasn't it? By comparison, because
I'm pretty sure the Arrows players, I think, might be watching that game on their phone too.
yeah, but
That's
that
by
as
the way,
in like
did not do.
that. I mean, the Arrows are there, but for if people say, okay, is it between like a rugby game or a hockey game? They'll be like, I'll watch the hockey game. I won't go to the rugby game if it's on at the same time. So again, I do agree where you're coming from,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to see this from like a commercial point of view. It's like if we only have a snippet of your time, how much action can we show you of why our sport is so great? Let us, and especially if we've heard of like, okay, Rugby Canada has to pay TSN for them to actually like broadcast games and things like that. If it's in a position where you can say we can fill 2 hours of time, and that includes the pre-show and post-show, then we can set it as 2 hours, and that's where we go. And so, from a commercial point of view, even though they're saying like, "Oh, we're improving accessibility, time and play," it's like what they're trying to say is we are trying to get as much attention as possible, and this is how we're going to go about doing it.
Okay, yeah. So like ultimately you're trying to be like we want the game to be shorter so that
Yeah, we can
TSN
grab your
can
attention.
squeeze it in between other sporting events that other people might care about more.
I'm taking this from like a North American
Yeah.
perspective,
Like
but this,
like
but I don't want this to go into like a generational divide of like damn kids on their TikToks, so they'll never enjoy a rugby game kind of thing. It's like I'm not doing that.
idea of making the game time maybe like easy for like a broadcaster to like lock in. We know like we're confident that you can get a game done in under 2 hours, so like that helps us plan programming schedules. I understand that idea. I mean, like I'm sure TSN has how long a hockey game. TSN
Yeah.
is they're gonna have how long a hockey game takes, like a lockdown, right? But
Hmm.
I think like that can kind of make sense. I ultimately though, if that's maybe kind of the goal, I guess I see it. But I think like ultimately, I just don't think the people that are like rugby fans that don't realize they're rugby fans yet because they haven't been exposed to the sport or whatever, like I don't think they're necessarily going to be drawn to the sport just because the game is 3 minutes shorter or there's like, an extra like 90 seconds of ball and play time. Right.
Mm.
Like I think those are just such like minor, like minuscule changes that to be honest, the crazy I mean, the scrum rule we might notice, but it's like the 60-second conversion kick thing, like you don't even notice that. Like I don't even know how far off guys were before that because it doesn't really feel like the game misses a beat with that law,
Mm.
right? And I think that that's ultimately good, but I think like in a way, like just by like trimming down how long a game takes, like I don't see how that makes it more accessible. And you're talking about like marketing and like profitability and or like marketing viability and like how sponsorships can react and stuff, right? And I look at like we've been saying for the past couple of weeks, the most famous rugby player in the world right now might be Iona Mayer, right? And I look at her and I see a rugby player that plays in a league that has a last name on a jersey, right?
Yeah.
Sevens competition and stuff. That means like anybody that's watching Dancing with the Stars right now, that's like, okay, I kind of want to go check out some rugby, right? They can go and watch a USA game and know exactly who she is because Mare is going to be written on her back, right? And know
Mm.
that. Whereas like and similarly too, right? Like, I'll use it as like maybe a bit of a ridiculous example, but like any of those like Taylor Swift fans that started watching football because of Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce's really easy to find on a football field. He's the guy that has Kelce written on his back, right?
Mm.
Like it's easy and it's easy to like notice and stuff. And I think like with sponsors, if you can build that up, like I own a Mare right now is probably the most like appealing rugby athlete in North America from a sponsorship point of view because people actually know who she is. But like for any of the other players and stuff, right? Like it's gonna be hard for certain guys to be noticed and gain that type of like sponsorship and stuff if you're also constantly like nobody knows who you are because you play like you're a lock back row guy. So in the first game they watched you, you wore 4. The second game they watched you, you wore 8. The third game they watched you, you wore 19. Right. And it's like it does that also doesn't help anybody either. Like I think there's if you want to increase accessibility, engagement, there's bigger fish that you can probably fry than worrying about how long a scrum takes to set up.
Mm. Well, we'll have to see how these rules actually come into play. All I'll say is that if World Rugby ever decide to do an automatic 7 points for scoring underneath the post, then I know that we've gone too far with these law changes. But anyway, if you would actually like to see any of these laws implemented into current events that are going on in the rugby world, well, you can do so because they're currently implemented into the WXV. Again, that game, Canada versus England for the WXV 1 trophy, will be held on this Saturday, and we'll give you all the details, though we do expect it to be on TSN. Also coming up this weekend is the Premiership in URC continuing on Sportsnet, and the Premiership Women's Rugby is taking place on the Rugby Network. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more as well as our written pieces on our website, therougerugby.ca. You can also find our podcasts on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We have our YouTube channel at The Rouge Rugby. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, all at The Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can people find you on social media?
At Brissette the Jet across all social media networks.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Derek, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.